Hey guys, alright? Welcome to our channel. On TV, we see an interview taking place with a doctor who talks about how scientists have managed to modify viruses and use them to their advantage in the cure of terminal diseases like cancer, and how they are happy with the results. 3 years after this interview, we see the streets of New York deserted and abandoned, where animals can now run freely. There is not a single human being anywhere, and vegetation takes over the city, where everything is in absolute silence. However, this silence is soon broken by the sound of a Mustang GT500 engine, driven by Robert Neville, accompanied by his dog named Sam. As he drives through the empty streets, he almost hits a group of deer, causing him to swerve on the road. But we soon see him chasing after the animals, and we realize that he was actually hunting, and when he aims to shoot, his sight is blocked by a protective barrier, preventing him from shooting. Robert accelerates to reach the other side and manages to keep up with the herd of deer. However, he encounters a street that is impossible to proceed on, as it is filled with cars that have been parked there for a long time. Robert decides to continue his hunt on foot, through the tall vegetation in what used to be one of the busiest centers in the world, at the intersection of two major avenues in New York, Times Square. But now it is only a hunting ground for Robert. However, that was not a day to bring home a catch, as the only deer that was nearby was preyed upon by a lioness. Being compassionate, Robert did not want to take the meat away from her, as it would be food for an entire family of lions. When the alarm on his watch then goes off, signaling that it's time for him to leave, as he knows the sun is already close to setting. As soon as the alarm rings, Robert runs back to the same house he has been living in since before the events that led the world to be as it is today. However, this house is extremely fortified by Robert. After arriving in another car, before entering, he spreads a liquid on the ground to mask his scent and avoid being detected up to that point. In this house, he maintains a good supply of food and old news DVDs that allow him to maintain his sanity by pretending to follow an old routine. He also listens to music, talks to Sam, and performs his usual tasks, such as cooking for himself and his dog, and giving him a bath. However, no matter how much he tries to distract himself, his dark memories always come back. Just before nightfall, he locks all the doors and windows with large steel plates and then hides in the bathroom bathtub with Sam and some silent weapons, where he can hear the terrifying sound of the dark seekers outside, who are humans infected by a virus that scientists could not control. At that moment, memories of his family come to his mind. When the outbreak occurred, the government decided to isolate the island, as it was the epicenter. Panic filled the streets as people tried to escape in crowds. Robert is a military scientist and rushes to get his wife Zoe, his daughter Marley, and Sam, who was still a puppy at that time. He wanted them to leave the island to stay with a relative, and Zoe got angry when she realized that Robert wasn't going with them because he wanted to stay to analyze the virus and find a cure. This leads to an argument between them when suddenly an already infected person hits their car, almost causing Robert to lose control. Robert didn't give up on the idea of finding a cure even in the present. Every morning, after exercising with Sam, he goes to the laboratory in his basement to monitor his experiments. Sam is not allowed downstairs because she could get infected, but Robert is fine because he is apparently immune. In the laboratory, there are a series of caged mice carrying the virus, and Robert has been testing the different serums he made for a cure on them. They all failed until this morning when Robert discovers that one of the mice is actually improving. Now he can move on to the next stage of testing, but he will need a human subject for that. Afterwards, Robert and Sam visit the movie rental store, where Robert has placed several mannequins scattered around as part of trying to maintain the illusion of a normal routine. He talks to them as if they were old friends and always returns the movies he picks up before choosing another one. He also pretends that one of the mannequins is trying to flirt with him. Robert promises Sam that one day he will talk to her. Next, the pair visits parks where Robert is growing corn to pick some for himself. They also keep a map of all the houses they have visited and choose a new one to explore each day. This allows them to find new supplies of food, although most of the things they find are medicines and cleaning products left behind from the outbreak struggle. Sometimes, Robert also comes across really depressing signs of people who used to live in the area, such as their bodies or even nurseries that were never used. After getting gasoline for the car, Robert proceeds with the final part of his routine, which involves going to the edge of a dock to broadcast a recording over an AM radio, inviting all survivors to meet him there at noon. While he waits, he has a little fun by playing golf on top of Air Force planes. One afternoon, Sam notices a deer running around, so she and Robert start chasing it through the streets. The deer panics when it encounters a blocked road and quickly enters a dark, old building. Sam follows it inside, which makes Robert nervous because such a dark place could be a perfect nest for dark seekers. Since Sam doesn't come out when called, Robert has to enter as well, and he tries to be as quiet as possible to not reveal his presence there. He hears some terrifying noises that startle him, but he refuses to leave without Sam, so he takes a moment to gather courage and covers his flashlight with his hand before going deeper. He follows a trail of blood up the stairs, which leads him to a body behind some furniture. For a moment, Robert fears the worst until he realizes that it's not Sam but the deer they were chasing. As he continues his search, Robert encounters a group of dark seekers standing near a wall. Fortunately, he reacts quickly and steps back, keeping the light of his flashlight away from them. Robert turns around and finally finds Sam hiding under a table, but she refuses to come out because there is something that frightens her. Robert continues to call her, but she is fixated on something ahead. At that moment, Robert turns around and sees a dark seeker eating something, which quickly lunges at him. Robert immediately shoots him before fleeing with Sam, telling the dog to take a different corridor and go through a hole that showed the light outside, while the other dark seekers chase him closely and almost catch up to him. Robert runs until he reaches one of the windows and jumps just as the dark seekers catch up to him, causing the sunlight to kill the two monsters that fall with him to the ground and trap the others inside. After reuniting with Sam, Robert sets up a special trap using a truck on a bridge and some old tarps that he places at the entrance of the building. He tells Sam not to follow him to avoid infection, then he takes some of his own blood and lets it drop onto the tarp. As a dark seeker approaches to feed on the blood, the trap is activated, causing the truck to fall and drag the dark seekers into the tarp. A second dark seeker, considered the alpha of the group, peeks out of the building to roar in clear fury at Robert, only to quickly retreat when the sunlight starts to burn him. Moments later, Robert has the female dark seeker he captured in his laboratory, tying her to the table to test the cure he is developing. He first uses UV light to confirm that she is infected with the virus, and he discovers that she has a butterfly tattoo. Robert begins by injecting the serum he created from the successful rat into her, and after a few seconds of nothing, the dark seeker suddenly starts screaming and struggling against her restraints. After a moment of panic, the dark seeker passes out, and all her vital signs go to zero on the monitor. Robert immediately gives her a new injection to keep her alive, but he can't help but angrily shake the furniture for the failure. Then he places the dark seeker behind a glass door before recording his progress for the day, mentioning the fact that the alpha male deliberately exposed himself to sunlight. This makes him think that decreased brain function or food scarcity is causing them to ignore their basic survival instincts, and social decay seems complete. This reminds Robert of the outbreak day again, because people were behaving like mad in the streets. Many ships were leaving the island, but only those with authorization could pass, and people didn't like being left behind in quarantine, especially those with children begging for help. The roads were blocked by the army, but the soldiers had orders to escort Robert and his family to safety, so they continued on foot. When they reached the port, the soldiers used a scanner to ensure they were not infected. Marley passed, but Zoe didn't. Mother and daughter panicked because they didn't want to be separated, which led Robert to create a scene and use his position to order a second check. Zoe passed the test this time, and as a military family, they managed to leave in a helicopter. Robert insisted on staying and said goodbye to Zoe and Marley, who decided to leave Sam with him for protection. As the helicopter took off, Marley made a butterfly shape with her hands as a farewell. Back in the present, Robert and Sam go through their usual routine, but at the end of the day, when they are about to go home, something strange happens. There is a mannequin near the bridge, and Robert is sure he didn't put it there. Feeling like he is going crazy, Robert shoots the mannequin as if to prove it's not real, and the mannequin simply falls to the ground. Then Robert thinks he can hear whispers around him and starts shooting into the air like a madman. As nothing happens, Robert decides to check the mannequin, but as soon as he approaches, a car falls and he gets caught by a rope. The Dark Seekers had copied his trap. Robert hits his head and faints as blood starts dripping on the ground. Moments later, Robert wakes up to the alarm on his watch ringing, signaling it's time to leave. Sam is still there, and the sun is about to set, so Robert uses a knife to cut the rope. As he falls to the ground, he accidentally stabs his leg with the knife, and now he needs to crawl on the floor to get out of there. Sam follows him at first, but stops when she hears growling coming from a building. When the Alpha emerges from there with 3 infected dogs and releases them to chase Robert, the dogs recoil when they burn in the last ray of sunlight. Robert forces himself to stand up and runs to retrieve his weapon from the car before the sun sets completely, allowing the dogs to attack. One of them is grabbed by Sam, who bites it while Robert fights the others, knocking one down with his other weapon. However, before he can help Sam, the other dog jumps on him, and he tries to defend himself as best he can from the creature's bites. Just as he's about to be bitten, Sam jumps on top of the dog, and Robert manages to grab his weapon and kill it. Sam, however, is badly injured and in pain, so Robert ignores his own pain to pick her up and take her to the laboratory, where he gives her a dose of his serum to see if she will transform. He then holds her in his arms and sings a song to her, but slowly, Sam starts to transform and almost bites him. Devastated, Robert has no choice but to sacrifice her. After grieving for her loss, Robert gives Sam a burial in a garden and tries to return to his routine. He takes many pills to try to forget the pain, and when he goes to the video store, he finally talks to the mannequin he imagined flirting with him, saying that he promised his best friend he would do it. Obviously, the mannequin doesn't respond, and something in Robert finally breaks. Furious and completely hopeless, Robert drives his car through the night to run over any Dark Seekers that are in his way as revenge. He manages to kill some of them, but the others attack him under the orders of the Alpha, even climbing a lamppost to make it fall onto Robert's car. Then, they overturn the car to trap Robert inside it, but when the Alpha enters the car through the window, a sudden UV light blinds them and causes the Dark Seekers to flee. Robert isn't feeling well because he hit his head when the car flipped, but he can tell that someone else is driving him in their car. This person asks where to take him, so Robert gives his address and asks to ensure they aren't being followed before passing out. That night, Robert dreams of his family again. After the helicopter took off, the government bombed the bridge to seal the island. One of the helicopters lost control as people tried to jump onto it, and it crashed into the helicopter with Robert's family, killing them instantly. The next morning, Robert wakes up to the sound of an animated movie on TV. The wound on his leg has been stitched, but he is still cautious and grabs a weapon before heading to the kitchen, where for a moment he thinks he sees his family again. In reality, it's Anna and her son Ethan. They were the ones who saved him the previous night. Anna has prepared breakfast, so Robert sets the gun aside and sits with them, listening to Anna's story. They are from Maryland and stopped at the port when they heard Robert's message. They are heading to Vermont because there is a safe zone full of survivors in the mountains, where it seems that the cold has kept the virus at bay. Robert refuses to believe it and tells Anna that everyone is dead as he angrily throws his plate to the ground. Realizing how close he is to losing control, Robert heads upstairs to have a minute alone. After calming down, he joins the others again and takes the opportunity to quote the movie and prove to Ethan that he won't harm him. After thanking Anna for the rescue, they have a little conversation. Anna explains that she was on a Red Cross evacuation ship outside of Sao Paulo, but those boats were not meant to be permanent. When the Navy disbanded, Anna's group returned to the coast to search for supplies, and someone stole their boat. 5 people in her team were immune, but they were killed by the Dark Seekers. She still intends to go to Vermont, but Robert refuses to go with her, explaining that he wants to stay at Ground Zero and work on a cure. Later, they go to check the area where they found Robert the previous night, and he inspects the trap, realizing that it was made with the tools they took from his own trap. Robert doesn't want to believe that the Dark Seekers did it because they are not supposed to have higher brain function, which means they shouldn't be able to plan, hate, or love. Anna thinks that the Dark Seekers might be evolving. Afterward, they take Ethan to have fun in a fountain, and when Robert hears Ethan complaining about the cold water, he gets an idea. The trio returns to the house, where Robert places the female Dark Seeker on a lot of ice, thinking that changing her body temperature might help the serum work better. Anna looks around the laboratory and discovers a bunch of photos showing that Robert had tested many versions of the serum on humans before, but it never worked. Later, Anna finds Ethan sleeping on the couch, so Robert offers to take him to his daughter's old bed. Anna comes across Robert's family photos, and he tells her a bit about them. When night falls, Robert seals all the windows, and once again, Anna tries to convince him to go with them. Robert wonders how Anna can be so certain that there is a colony, and when she says that God told her, Robert finally loses his patience. He yells at her, pointing out that most of humanity is dead, and the rest has turned into monsters, which means there is no God. Their conversation is interrupted when they hear some noises from outside. The Dark Seekers have followed the smell of the blood Robert spilled the previous night, and now they are there. Anna rushes to grab Ethan while Robert activates the lights he installed outside, but the Dark Seekers simply leap over them and destroy the lights. Then, Robert triggers a series of explosives he buried just as a precaution, killing the first group. Afterwards, Robert goes upstairs to look for Anna, but he is suddenly attacked by the Alpha. The two begin to fight, and Robert uses a screwdriver he finds on the floor to strike him, but the Alpha barely feels pain and throws Robert down the stairs. Robert takes the opportunity to grab a weapon he hid among the umbrellas, and when the Alpha dodges the shots to hide in another room, Robert fires a gas cylinder to cause an explosion. The Alpha climbs the stairs again, and Robert follows, shooting at him until he sees him jump out of the window. Then, he searches for Anna and Ethan, finding them hiding under some furniture while a Dark Seeker destroys the room ceiling. There's a weapon on a nearby table, so Robert runs, grabs the weapon, and shoots the monster as it turns to attack him. At that moment, Robert hears a noise from outside and discovers that the Alpha is back with even more Dark Seekers, so the trio runs to hide in the laboratory. While the Dark Seekers were scaling the building to enter through the hole their friend made, Robert and Anna were shocked to discover that the female test subject was improving. This means the cure is working, but before they can consider their options, the Dark Seekers reach the laboratory, and Robert has to close the glass door between them. He tries to say that he can save them, but the Dark Seekers don't listen and continue pounding furiously on the glass. When the Alpha arrives as well, he cracks the glass with his immense strength, then draws a symbol that Robert recognizes as a butterfly, just like the tattoo on the captured female Dark Seeker. This reminds him of Marley, and Robert finally understands that the Dark Seekers have emotions and that they were there to rescue one of their family members, not to kill. Robert drops his weapon and, ignoring Anna's pleas not to put them in danger, he disconnects the woman from the machines and then asks Anna to open the door. With great fear, she opens it, immediately provoking the Dark Seekers to attack, but the Alpha stops them with a scream. Robert slowly walks out as the Dark Seekers growl at him in fury. He then takes a syringe and injects the woman with a medication that wakes her up. The Alpha immediately rubs its forehead against hers, happy with their reunion, and then takes her away from there. Robert tries to apologize but only receives another growl in response, and then they leave. Now that Robert understands that the city belongs to the Society of Dark Seekers, he agrees to leave with Anna and Ethan. The next morning, they begin their journey to Vermont, but first, Anna makes a new recording, speaking to any survivors who may hear it, urging them to go to the safe colony where they are also heading now.